Welcome back, everyone, to another one-on-one with Jerry Hall. Today's conversation is with @Hashoshi4 from Twitter. I know him as Forrest. He has an incredible YouTube channel. He's been primarily an Ethereum-based developer. We're going to talk about oracles. We're going to talk about XRP and Cardano. This is a very insightful conversation, one that answered a ton of questions for me, but also stimulated many more going forward. That conversation coming up right now. Forrest, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. How are things there in Florida at your in-laws?
Hey, it's going, man. It's going. Just trying to enjoy the sun and enjoy being away from my my home back up north. So it's good.
Right on, enjoying the weather. Now, let me ask you this. Are you doing much studying or creating any content from the in-laws place?
Yeah. I mean, people might recognize this background. People are hassling me for not making my bed, which I don't make my bed. That's just not a thing I do. But yeah, making content. I'm definitely keeping up with my Friday weekly news video, and so every Friday you can catch that on my channel. But yeah, still keeping up with content, still studying, and just doing my thing here.
Right on. Well, I would be remiss to not take this time to chat with a smart contract developer about a hot topic right now. It seems to be all over Twitter, and that is Chainlink,
Yep.
but not specifically Chainlink. We could talk about specifically Chainlink. I'm curious about oracles overall. It's a fascinating element to smart contract, smart contracts being able to be executed, and that whole trusted data source, that whole thing is like a big, it's kind of a mystery to me. I know generally how an oracle works and what it's supposed to do, but it seems to me that it would be very difficult to get it to be like the trusted source. I mean, what kind of rigorous things do you have to do to make sure that this input that you're getting from the outside world is in fact the right info? I was just curious, let's chat about oracles for a minute.
Cool. Yeah. So let's go. We'll take a walk across this whole topic. So the first thing is smart contracts, first and foremost. Even those who coined the name smart contracts have admitted sort of remorse with calling them that, because not all smart contracts are contracts at all.
Right.
They're all really just code at the end of the day. Some could be said to be contracts, and there are states in the US and places abroad that deem smart contracts legally. Well, that's a separate topic. And smart contracts are not smart. The code will only do what the smart contract developer has developed it to do. And one of the big things we see is sometimes they do things that the smart contract developers didn't intend them to do, because people use code very differently around the world, and not just based on your location, but also just the way that you use technology is different. And so that's why you see some of these DeFi products having issues, because while the code, for all intents and purposes, is written properly and written to be secure, the way it's used is maybe differently than it was intended, or there's something external that affects how it acts and how it reacts to things. So smart contracts are not smart, they're just code. And one of the big things is that because smart contracts are often the gatekeepers that we've tried to replace, instead of having an escrow facilitated where you have a person or a business saying, we're going to hold money in escrow until the fulfillment of some sort of good or service, and at which point we will verify that good or service has been rendered, and then we'll distribute the payment. Normally you pay someone to do that. With a smart contract, it's not a person, so you can pay less, and you take out the intermediaries and you replace it with code. That's all it is. But the problem is that getting data into the smart contract to tell it whether or not that good or service was rendered is where there's a huge attack vector, and where a lot of these things are going wrong. And so that includes DeFi with things like flash loans. The reason why that flash loan went bad is because price feeds were manipulated. So the contract is making the right decision based off of the code that it has, but the decision was made on bad data. And so the wrong decision was made. You see what I'm saying?
I do. So the bad information came into the blockchain via an oracle of some sort.
Yeah,
No.
and so Oracle, or
Okay.
an oracle is really a general term for any provider of external data
Right.
to an on-chain entity, right? Which is a general holding term. What you
Mhm.
really need, though, is a secure oracle, a trustworthy oracle process. And that's not as easy to come by because technically, I think during the flash loan situation that we were talking about, I think it was the BZX flash loan. Um, it's not even a hack. It was just an exploit, right? Where the price information coming from Kyber was manipulated in that instance, right? Purposefully, so that the contract would do what the attacker wanted it to do. And so that brought attention to the fact that you need something that can give you more. It's not even just trustworthy data that is less susceptible to manipulation. That's the key, I think. And so oracles really are the pursuit of a means by which you can provide external data into smart contracts so they can make decisions properly, as securely, as efficiently, and as little prone to manipulation as possible, in essence.
No, I totally hear you. So I have a scenario I'd love to run by you. And this was
Sure.
something that was kind of in the back of my head and then came to the forefront early on in my digital asset research experience, whatever you want to call it. So this is like mid 2018. I'm an older
Mm-hmm.
guy, and obviously I know I'm not going to live forever, and I don't know if my assets will mature to a point where I will take them out of this crypto world and get them into the legacy world that has all the incredible assignees associated. In other words, my son being the beneficiary, my daughter being a beneficiary, these type of
Mm-hmm.
things, and all that set. However, in the crypto world, none of that set. So one of the things I was thinking about was, okay, whether it be an Ethereum, a Cardano, or even like an XRP Codius smart contract that
Mm-hmm.
would be literally the trustee of all my assets. It would hold all my
Yeah.
private keys, all that stuff. And it would need one reliable source of data, i.e. a authentic death certificate, and upon getting that, it would then execute the contract and transfer these private keys for all these assets to my beneficiaries. And I was thinking,
Yeah.
this seems like something that would be very, very easy to do. And then I started talking to some people, and I guess it isn't. I guess it's
Yeah.
not
It's
that easy.
it's easy to do, but harder to do right. It's harder to do in a very secure way because you always get to this point, and I've experienced this a ton, where you say, okay, we can do this and we can implement this, and then you constantly are saying what if, and you eventually start coming up with all these scenarios in which you can game this solution. So then you try and architect around that, and then by doing that you introduce something else, right? So in this case, the first thing that comes to mind is you have to trust the signatory that distributed that death certificate, and you have to realistically, because again, smart contracts aren't smart, you either have to have some sort of application or some sort of logic that resides off chain, likely, to validate that that death certificate is legitimate. And that's if you can get code to do it, but very likely you have to have a person do it, which introduces a huge manipulation risk. And that is the precise problem that I think people have, is a lot of the use cases that are prevalent for smart contracts and that make a lot of sense for smart contracts can't be realized because of these sorts of attack vectors.
Wow. Okay. So I think it's safe to say then we're not as close as I thought we were to smart contracts being commonplace.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
would
a
say,
fair assumption?
commonplace from the perspective of being used for mainstream applications by people who are not interested in this space whatsoever. We're not to the point yet where you can have a smart contract running behind the scenes and the experience is good enough to warrant a user not having any clue that a smart contract or a blockchain is behind the whole thing, you know, running their day to day, or getting a life insurance policy using, you know, smart contract based solutions and those types of things. We're not there yet, and that's totally fine. I honestly, I'd be worried if we were already doing that, because there's a lot of stuff that has to happen first, and a lot of things that we don't have figured out as a collective to get that to work.
Very interesting. See, in my mind, I'll tell you, so this, as I was thinking through this problem, my own personal problem, and thinking about how could these protocols that I'm reading about, how could they solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
Then I get into thinking, okay, let's go beyond Jerry. Let's go beyond Jerry and look at the population of the planet. And I was thinking to myself, if I was a young man, I would study enough law and enough code that I could consult lawyers and developers on the creation of certain kind of every person will need type of smart contracts. So estate planning or disbursement of assets upon, you know, their passing kind of thing. Because these are all extremely cumbersome processes in the existing legacy world. I don't know if you've ever had to deal with a probate or somebody passing and every element of every asset was completely buttoned down and easy to deal with. I've, you know, lost grandparents and parents, and although some things may be very cut and dry and easily delineated and can be executed easily, there's always
other things aren't.
There's always a ton of stuff that isn't. And I can imagine that if there were even just a few per state in the United States, attorneys' offices set up with developers and people who understood this technology, they could get a head start and start getting these things out to the people that will need them and can benefit from them. So I thought that was an incredible, like for a young person, what an incredible career path. If you're interested in crypto, learn enough about the law so that when you're talking to the lawyers, you understand what you're talking about, and understand enough about developers that you can get a team together, or even just one or two, and start doing this and making these things available. Because I see the future is going to be on the blockchain, whether it's centralized or not. Some will be centralized because they'll need to be, but it's just you know, well, I mean, I guess there's some rare cases where databases actually work better than a blockchain, but for a lot of these type of applications, it's blockchain. You know, as far as being able to execute these type of step 1, step 2, step 3 delineation of ownership of assets through whatever process, whether it be divorces, passings, etc.
Identity,
or even
I think a lot of it is,
or even acquisition of assets. You know, buying a piece of property, you know, with a house on it or something of that nature. You know, so when you see, you think in code, I'm sure. I mean, you think of things like this, right?
Yeah.
So is there a tip you could give the layman like me to help spruce up the lens that I look at some of these things through? Because I'm just coming from a place of, I understand the concept of the protocol, and I understand that there'll need to be verification from a trusted third party, right? Disinterested, trusted third party. Well, you already kind of have with the whole, what is really trusted and what can be gamed and what not can be gamed. And maybe the person that is the executor of a smart contract might need to have a disinterested third party watching them or verifying or
this space has increasingly become a game of who watches the watchman, right? It's you as a developer of something in the DeFi space, I've built it based on the standards for building a smart contract on Ethereum, for example. Use Solidity because it's the most ubiquitous.
Right.
You build it to be pausable, right? So that if something starts going wrong and if something's being manipulated, this I think came out of the DAO hack, to be honest with you. You can, with an admin key, rather the key that deployed the contract in the first place, you can pause the contract, right? Then you can take steps to migrate to a new contract that closes that loophole. So that's developers doing what they're supposed to do. But then you have people saying, well, is it really decentralized if someone has an admin key?
Right.
And the answer is definitively no. But the reality is that all of this stuff is a spectrum, and every single decision that's made has a trade-off, right? So as users, we either can choose to have something that can be we can protect from manipulation, and we can protect from big loopholes in contracts, basically causing an ecosystem to crumble and then just being left to our own devices. Or we can choose to have an element of centralization there to add protections for that, right? And so it's like right now it's either or. You either pick and say we want no intervention. If something goes wrong, we accept the consequences. Or you say we're okay with them having an admin key only for these sorts of instances. And there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's just what makes most sense for the users that use it and for the people that made it, and that's why I say like decentralization is a crappy like feature goal. Like you don't say our product use case and our value prop is that we're decentralized, because not all use cases make sense to just be 100% decentralized. Exactly. And I would argue to say too that there are a lot of use cases that are actually worse by trying to aim for 100% decentralization, because it's an unattainable goal. At least now, human beings naturally tend towards and push towards pseudo-centralization in every facet. I mean, you can look at books and novels and history and everything, even in instances where we tried to be more of a decentralized, organized populace. It just never works that way, because when stuff goes wrong, people look to others who will step into leadership positions. So we have to sort of architect things to be as decentralized as possible, but also fitting with what the use case needs, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm just one guy, so.
Well, at the end of the day, if you're not serving a customer and solving the problem, centralized, decentralized, none of those things, those are philosophical or moral flags to wave, where I think you've got the right view. It's solving a problem for a client or a customer or a population or an industry, whatever it be. I wanted to ask you, so directly being involved in the creation of an Ethereum-based DeFi product, what trusted, and I'm going to use this term, oracle is employed with that project?
So I would say most projects now in the DeFi space are either employing something of their own design,
right,
or they're using one of two other projects.
Like, can you name them?
One of them being the much hyped at the moment, everyone is on Twitter about it, Chainlink.
Okay.
Or they're using Teller, Tellor, which is very much targeted towards DeFi, whereas Chainlink is more multi-purpose for basically a bunch of different use cases.
I'd never heard of Teller. Tellor.
Yes. Another project that I'm quite a fan of in the Oracle space, and I think it should be getting attention like Chainlink is, and that is not something about price. It's just about the tech, its quality.
Gotcha. Can I ask you to judge something for me?
Sure.
Okay. So I think I try to equate things that I'm learning about to things that I already know, right?
That's a great way of going about it.
I made an analogy that I saw the protocols, i.e. Ethereum, Cardano, Tezos, Ethereum, blah, 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 blah. These protocols is being like browsers. And we may, as people in the future, decide to use different browsers. I already use several different browsers. I'm not a one browser guy. I have several different browsers that I use depending upon which device I'm on, etc., just for ease. And, you know, it's just the way it is. And then I equated these oracles to search engines. So for instance, for me, I may use 3 or 4 different browsers, but when I'm really searching something, I'm searching on Google. Now, that's not to say Google's the best. I'm just saying that's my choice that I made. And I saw, so I drew analogies that the protocols are like browsers, and the search engine would be equivalent to an oracle. Am I anywhere near on base with that, or did I go completely sideways?
Yeah, I think in this context, it makes perfect sense. I would even take it a level lower, and I would say these protocols are like internet protocols, and oracles are like, I guess, the equivalent of like transport protocols or DNS and things like that, right?
Huh.
Things that make the internet more predictable, that make the internet protocols more effective, and things that prevent your requests from returning you basic nonsense. I think that's another one that makes sense. But I mean, I think that analogy works because in
Okay.
reality, oracles are a bucket of technologies that are not fully formed. We're not done yet. I think that because Chainlink has gotten so much attention, because there are projects that are competing, people are like, okay, well, the Oracle problem is solved. I can tell you factually that people thought the Oracle problem was solved 5 years ago with the first set of Oracle projects that came into the fray. So we're not done. But you were asking before about how do you approach this problem and to think about it like,
Yeah.
something that people understand. The way that I approach this problem, the way that I would, again, being one guy with one brain and by no means the definitive source, but I would approach this problem the same way blockchain protocols approach reaching consensus on their own state data, right? What
Ah,
is the valid block of transactions, right? All of these things are founded upon a core principle of Byzantine fault tolerance, right? You
right.
will in every instance have a certain subset of players in the game that are malicious or that are just gone and aren't responding, right? So you need to build your Oracle system to also be Byzantine fault tolerant in the sense that even if 1/3 of the actors are either gone or unresponsive or malicious, as long as you have 2/3 intact, you can get a final product that's within a certain boundary or a certain bound of correctness or integrity that you're looking for. And that's why I think anyone who's saying we have a solution to Oracle problems that includes pulling data from somewhere and then passing it back to the chain with no steps in between isn't really a solution to the Oracle problem. There has to be, in my mind, aggregations. There has to be weighted averaging to produce a piece of data that is net, like I guess a net solution or aggregation from multiple data
Right.
sources. Because you can trust that a little bit more than you can coming from one. Because if one data source is manipulated and you pull from that, your results are manipulated. But if you have 9 data sources that you're pulling from and you aggregate them by weighted average based on some sort of reputation score, even your resulting product is way less prone to manipulation than the former.
Well, then that to me would segue the actual need for some very solid aggregators. And I don't know
Yeah.
if they need to be mutually exclusive or can be separate standalone entities. You know what I mean? To function properly and actually give, well, because there's an element of confidence that's going to come into play. Obviously,
Yeah.
people are going to, as a developer, I would assume you gravitate to things that you know work, right? So if you found a,
And things that I
or
know, things that I know how they work. you know?
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Whereas me, I just need to know that they work. I don't necessarily need to know how they work. But I could see where reputation and consistency would be how the quote unquote winners in that milieu are going to be defined. So therefore, this stuff around a project's token price being relevant isn't relevant as it pertains to the functionality, trustworthiness, validity of the actual entity itself. This is going to be an interesting thing to follow, I think, over the next couple of years, because again, like I said, just this is the layman. I see programmable blockchain contracts for the transfer of value being something that progressively takes more and more and more of the legacy systems resources for these things over time, because it just makes sense. You know what I mean? You don't need
I agree with
Einstein to figure that out. So it's going to be how and when that happens, and the players that develop a name for themselves going forward and develop, getting track records. And I don't know what you said, something about network scores or things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And even maybe reliable rating agencies, because I know we don't really have that in crypto, really. I know a few people.
Yeah, because I think people argue about it. It's like, well, if we have a rating agency, is it decentralized? And so again, I think it's like we have to stop measuring everything by how decentralized it is, right? We all know that Coinbase is not decentralized. Period. Right. We can move on. It's like it's not an issue.
Can you get your money in, get your crypto, and get out? Yes. Is it relatively safe and easy through the process? Yes.
Yeah, and if you're not into it
from an exchange, do you want to be able to get it?
If you're not into it, you can quit. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm with you, man.
Point.
I'm with
you.
Good
point. So I think okay, you've done an excellent. Thank you, by the way. Excellent job.
Anytime.
On helping me kind of get a real understanding of this Oracle game, the aggregation of information, and the fact that it's not solved yet. Keep your eyes open. This is going to be a progressive thing going forward. Okay, great. What is absolutely exciting for Forrest in the digital asset space right now? And if you want, I'd just like to hear what you think is exciting. What's got you feeling good about whatever you're involved in?
I think one of my favorite things right now in the space is NFTs, non-fungible tokens. I think they are amazing. I think that the engine token standard, the ERC 1155 standard, is the most impactful, or will be the most impactful invention for Ethereum in a 5-year period. I think it's the biggest thing to happen in the Ethereum ecosystem since ERC20. And I think that it's not appreciated yet because it's not being used fully yet, but it's a way more efficient standard, and it uses all sort of the latest and greatest stuff that's in the Ethereum specs.
Interesting.
To build out both fungible and non-fungible token ecosystems that could be used for. Yeah, sure. It could be used for gaming, which obviously is what Engine's really focused on.
Right.
But it can be used for a ton of other things. It can be used for enterprise, managing assets, both fungible and non-fungible, for use in like community building, right? So if I have my YouTube channel and I want to distribute an ERC style non-fungible collectible for a special episode, I can do that using this standard. Okay. And it's more efficient than the traditional non-fungible token ERC 721s.
That's interesting. I think there is definitely for sure niche stuff that would take off like a rocket.
Yeah.
Pending one's popularity, following, etc. And then the other thing I think is really fascinating about that is that maybe no. Let me ask a question. I just realized I'm making an assumption. I don't want to do that.
Sure.
Okay. Let's say we're making a presumption here, but let's say Ethereum does make a successful transition to Ethereum 2.0. We're no longer a proof of work protocol. We're a proof of stake protocol. Then
yeah,
how do these offshoots, these ERC, like for instance the 55s that you're talking about, or even the 71s, or anybody, how does that mechanism change now? Because all of a sudden the underlying validation scheme is now completely different, and there's a whole new value proposition from hardware to token. You know what I mean?
I would argue,
walk me through that.
I would argue that this is precisely the reason why Ethereum not only has taken longer to build out proof of stake and to build out ETH 2.0 as a spec.
Yeah.
And the reason why because ETH 2.0 has been in talks basically since the day Ethereum as we know it came out. And so we were close to ETH 2.0 in 2017. They were already talking about it, but I think they trashed the entire thing that they had, and they redid everything from scratch and re-researched and rebuilt and re-architected. And the reason they did that is because they have the much harder job than projects like Tezos, Algorand, Cardano, all these other proof of stake oriented chains, to create something that's both backwards compatible and doesn't break everything that's out there, and also works exceptionally better than what was there before. And so I think that's the goal is, and I cannot speak to whether or not this will happen definitively, but the goal is all of these projects that already work today will work exactly the same way, and the smart contracts should work at least mostly exactly the same way in ETH 2.0, because the virtual machine will be predictably different, right? They're moving technologies a little bit. I think they're changing to WebAssembly. There's going to be some new stuff in the virtual machine, but Solidity will still be a language that people use to build smart contracts. And reality is, I think the main difference is that the ceiling for what these developers can do should be a little bit higher. And I think that's the only thing that's going to be different, is things should move faster. Hopefully the virtual machine changes and language changes should make Solidity a little safer. And I think there should be more tools at people's disposals. I don't think it should break anything. That's the thought.
Well, I could see where that would be the goal. But here's and I'm no coder. I mean, I am not the guy you want at a table talking about architecture. Okay. But it would seem to me there is an element of, every transaction has to get validated, right? You have, right? So, I mean, or you don't have anything. If your network cannot validate its transactions, you don't have anything.
You're cooked. Yeah.
You're cooked. You don't have anything. So with that being said, the conversion over to the proof of stake, for instance, how much, well, I mean, every transaction, everything is a transaction.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, how do you go backwards and say, okay, we're going to make this backwards compatible when, oh, hang on a second. Is the code as simple in Solidity as just saying, if A and B happens, C is the execution, is the transaction element of that, and then it doesn't matter if it's proof of work or proof of stake? Is it that simple? Oh, okay. I did not know that. Okay. All right. Well then, see, I was thinking it was going to be doomed.
Yeah, and that's part of the abstraction, is that.
Carry on.
And I think that there's still potential for stuff to go wrong. But the abstraction is that the smart contract developer today there's a lot of stuff to worry about, right? Like gas is a big thing to worry about, right? You have to make sure what you're trying to build operates within the confines of how expensive it's going to be for the end user.
Right.
That's just how it is, right? There are projects like, I think Unstoppable Domains, for example, that knows they're going to have to eat some of the gas costs so that it makes it reasonable for their users to use their stuff, which is fine. It's part of the business model. And don't necessarily quote me on that. They might have changed it, but I'm pretty sure there are a lot of projects that eat gas costs because it's expensive, especially when congestion is high. But ultimately, what that means is that there's a lot to worry about. One thing that the developer doesn't have to worry about is consensus. If you execute a transaction from a smart contract that is valid and that has been given adequate gas, it should be validated. And you don't really care how it's validated per se, as long as it's validated. And so in ETH 2.0, the same thing should happen, except in this case, proof of stake. The thing that was really threatening smart contracts was in an environment where you have sharding, where you're breaking up the ecosystem into multiple sort of independent blockchains that all feed into one main chain. How do you provably secure smart contract execution? Because if a smart contract is executed in shard A, you have to basically tell shard B, hey, this is what's happening, validate that, right? And then if you have 64 shards, that's now a 64, I guess, 64 times, if you really think about it, exponential in this case, the work that's necessary just to execute one transaction because of validation and sharing state across all of those different shards. It's not
and then
efficient.
it's not efficient at all. It's actually making more work and consuming more resources, whether it be in the form of code, whether it be in the form of power, electric, whatever, to do it. Yeah, that would seem to be not the most attractive avenue to go down, because really at the end of the day, it is about the end user. It is about, well, the immutable record is huge, right? You want that transaction to stand.
You need that.
And to stand over the test of time. Anytime you have a value transfer, that's huge, whether it be something big like a piece of property or even a car title, you know what I mean, for the old hoopty that you got in the backyard, whatever, it doesn't matter the dollar amount, you need it to be right and be able to verifiably be right over time. So that's that whole thing on that. And so costs and gas, well, that's okay, that's a whole nother topic on this whole cost to operate what you call gas.
Yeah,
that's even crazy.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing for.
You're there. Are you still working on that DeFi project currently right now?
No, it was something that I was tinkering with, and I think the biggest thing that I learned from, I guess, dealing with it is DeFi is not necessarily something that I want to work on to just keep building products, because I don't have a passion and a love for finance the same way that I think you need to build this stuff. Like, I like to understand it as a student, understand flash loans, understanding liquidity and those sorts of things, but I don't love it, right? So I found it to be kind of a drag because I wasn't that interested in the topic. I like DeFi because of what it is and what it stands for. And I think there's so many powerful things coming out of DeFi. Personally, it's just not something I'm that interested in working on. I think there's other cool things. I'd much rather work on NFT stuff and gaming stuff and collectibles and even NFTs almost NFTs as like tokenized assets, I think would be really cool.
Well, I think in gaming, that's going to be monstrous.
I agree.
I think that is going to be absolutely monstrous. Now, before I ever heard about crypto, I tinkered around in this virtual environment called Second Life. And I can so distinctly remember there were so many creative people in game, in world, making very unique things. And depending upon what milieu you were in, those things had value. and they receive, so for their time and their energy creating this thing, whatever it was. I liked the games they played. There was one guy that made customized games of, like, he made a customized battleship game, you know, the 2-player, you know, you sunk my battleship.
Yeah.
Fun as heck. He made me a Stratego game. Remember the board game Stratego?
Classic, man.
Love those games when I was a kid. So I paid this guy to make me those things, and I paid him in the in-game currency, which back then you could come in and out of fiat with. You could sell
you buy
your
it with
lindens.
cash.
You buy your lindens with your debit card, and you can get put on your debit card cash if you wanted to sell lindens. And so this whole space that you're talking about, I can so clearly see how this could just go throughout almost any gaming
exactly
platform.
Right.
It's just incredible. I want to pick your brain about a topic though, because my audience, you know, is huge into projects like XRP, VeChain, Cardano, Ethereum, Bitcoin. That's pretty much the realm of my audience. I mean, there's some outliers, Casino Coin and some other little. Link is a big one right now. But what I wanted to ask you, specifically pertaining to flash loans, because I see a use case in the legacy financial system now that would allow for flash loans of, like, let's say XRP to somebody, a financial institution that did not want to buy or own XRP. So what they would do, let's say I'm Ripple, and we'll say Bank of America, they're a recognized partner. Bank of America doesn't want to buy XRP. They don't want to hold XRP yet, but they want to utilize the speed and efficiency of the Ripple network and this ODL technology. Okay, great. They get a credit line issued to them by Ripple, maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 billion or million or whatever it would be. And throughout the day, flash loans to borrow the XRP from Ripple and then pay it back based on each transaction that was done. So whether it be one of their customers like Dole Pineapple, with their headquarters in Hawaii, paying their factory workers in Costa Rica or in the Philippines or wherever, you know, this conversion of funds, and all being done in a flash loan. So zip. Are these, do you think is that another avenue for the flash loans? Because I know a lot of people were doing it with arbitrage opportunities as it pertains to currency and or digital assets, whether it be from Binance to Huobi or Uphold or, you know, wherever. We're putting these things together. What are your thoughts on that? Because the underlying asset XRP is super fast versus high peak times. Ethereum's not that fast, and obviously we know Bitcoin is not that fast.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I think that the ironically enough, flash loans work really well in instances where you have at least a handful of seconds to work with in a block cycle, a consensus cycle, so that you can fulfill the flash loan within one transaction. I think though that because the requirement is that you're going to have, at least now, you have to have crypto to take advantage of flash loans, because they require a deposit in crypto, regardless of where you go from there. Because there are people that have done flash loans where you borrow Ether and then you move that and use Uniswap to swap it, or you borrow DAI, you transfer to Sai, and you do all this crazy stuff, right? So you can do that. But I think you have to be connected up with the crypto ecosystem in a way that banks are not ready to do, / I'm hesitant to say that they will ever do. And the reason I say that is because XRP and really the product suite that Ripple has been building over this period of time, in my mind, is designed not to be the decentralized cryptocurrency and public network type of thing that we have over here with Ethereum, Bitcoin, Cardano, etc. It's designed to be a bridge to get banks to use more efficient and effective technologies, it's settling transactions. That's what it's really about. And that's
Correct.
why I hate that the cryptocurrency space on both sides is so like listless and like angry about XRP versus other projects, because in many ways they're not even comparable. It's not even apples to oranges. It's like broccoli to oranges. They're not even close to the same thing. It's a different species altogether.
I
And
agree.
so I don't think that it means that XRP is just unilaterally bad. I think what is bad is the plethora of people saying XRP to $100, buy now or get left behind. I think that's toxic stupidity.
Yeah.
But the same thing applies to Cardano, a project that I love and I really like and I have a lot of respect for, despite the issues. There are issues with every project.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just as stupid for people to say, when we're sitting at 2 cents per ADA a while back, it's going to $10 by the end of the year. Like, it's just impractical and unsafe for people to be campaigning these things. And it's also not what it's about. So I think if XRP is solving, not XRP necessarily, but the products Ripple is building, if they're solving problems, I'm all for it. I mean, go for it. But it isn't comparable. Like, you don't take XRP and put it up against Bitcoin and compare them, because they're not even close to the same thing. Once you get past like being technology built with code, it's over. Like, they're not the same.
They're not the same. And I'll tell you, Forrest, one of the things I love about you, and there are a bunch of us in the community that aren't about tribalism. I don't carry a flag and say it's this or nothing. I really want, I saw this whole thing developing just like I saw the internet boom happening, just like I saw the transition from landlines to cellular communication, from analog to digital, now data driven. As these innovations that I saw in the past, that I saw happen, I watched roll out in real time, but didn't participate in. I decided this time I'm participating. I'm going to get involved as an investor. I'm going to get educated as a human being. And the projects that make sense to me, I get behind. And so I have some Bitcoin in my kid's account. I have some Cardano. I have some VeChain. I have XRP. And I want all of them to be successful. Matter of fact, I'd like every valid project to be successful.
Yeah, because that means that there's something valuable being built. Yeah.
Exactly. And to spend time demeaning a project when there's so many incredible things happening all over the place, to me, is just a waste of energy. Let's be,
well, and I think
be happy.
I think the reason why we didn't see the same type of general populist tribalism, there was a lot of tribalism in the tech community for the people who were building technologies, I think, during the internet boom and smartphone time. And there's still tribalism regarding Apple versus iPhone and open source versus closed source. And there's all that stuff still, which is fine. But I think that the reason why it's so bad in crypto is because this whole entire movement has happened in a period of time where internet marketing rules the roost. And so you have a bunch of unsubstantiated claims being advertised in full voice that people latch onto. I also think that in many ways, investment and financial interest is woven into the very fabric of basically every project. And so you invest in something, and even if you don't fully understand it, which happens a lot, and that's okay, I guess that's okay, people will die on that hill because they are invested in it financially. So their emotions are linked to a project that may have lost its relevance, and that is a normal due course thing. And I think drawing parallels to the internet boom is smart, but people should take lessons learned from that. You were much more likely to net win if you were spread out a little more and you were less tribal than it was for you to jump on one ship and just hope to God that it wins, right? Because
good point.
Especially like when the bubble burst, right? There were very few that survived, very few. If you weren't on those few ships, your goose is cooked. In this case, though, if you spread your net a little wider and you accept the fact that it's very possible that the protocols that survive long term haven't even been invented yet, realistically.
Right.
It could very well be that every single thing we've talked about today and every single thing that exists right now will fail. It is just as likely that that happens than it does that any of them succeed. And so to invest so heavily financially, emotionally, and personally in something that you can never be 100% sure of, I think is just wasteful. Like, there are so many cool things to learn about. And if nothing else, projects like Ethereum, for all the people that despise Ethereum, Tezos, Algorand, Cardano would not exist if not for Ethereum making mistakes that could then subsequently be found as mistakes to be fixed by their projects, right? So that's the reality. So we should accept that and enjoy it.
You're a historian a little bit?
I love history, but I am not a historian, I wouldn't say.
Okay, because I was going to ask you if you're in the camp that believe that Ethereum came out of Vitalik's exposure to Stephen Thomas and the Codius platform that Ripple was working on back in 2012, 13, 14. I was just curious.
Yeah, very well could have. And I think that it's, yeah, it's very possible that that were the case. And I've actually read some interesting writing on that. And I think that that can be used politically for both, for both sides. It's like, folks who really love Ripple could say Ethereum would not exist if not for Ripple and what they had worked on early on. And then Ethereum could say, well, we took Ripple, which we thought was a bad idea, and made it a good idea. I think both, regardless of what's true, I think that this whole thing should just prove that everyone is inspiring everyone else in this space.
That was the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
I'm not believe me, I'm not a XRP exists because there was a group of guys that said Bitcoin is good, but it could be so much better. Let's do this. And then XLM is the same version of that for XRP. And, no. There is an incredible community of phenomenally brilliant people coming into this space, right? So the coders, the developers, the engineers, the guys that are in finance, right? The world of finance that's migrating into this space. The sheer enormity of human capital that is coming into this space in one way or another, to me, is the sign that I'm in the right place. You're right. Just following the human capital, following the actual money that's being put into development and things of that nature. Now, it's too late for me to make any investment decisions because I've made them already. And if I knew in January of 2018 what I know now, would I do things differently? Yes, but it's not it's
hindsight's 2020.
Exactly. It's July of 2020, and all I can do is to continue to educate myself. And when rebalancing opportunities come, they come. And if they don't, then I'm stuck and I wait it out. Wanted to close out with this because I'm looking at the clock here. You said you're a fan of Cardano, and so am I. And one of the things I'm looking for, maybe you can help direct me in the right place, is like, for instance, Chainlink is very much associated with Ethereum, right? I mean, it's right there. I'm curious, is there is Teller, or is there an Oracle project that you know of that's like associated with the code base and how Cardano is set up? Because I'm really fascinated by this whole Cardano project.
Yeah, not inherently yet. I can't say there won't be. Of course, there will be. I actually think that Chainlink is probably going to start orienting towards Cardano, because like that is what makes Chainlink unique. And actually Teller is pretty agnostic as well. Like, just because Link and other projects have they're not really ERC20s. It's actually like ERC 677s, I think, that run Link token. But just because they rely on the Ethereum chain to facilitate their token and their transfers and those sorts of things doesn't mean that the ecosystem that is Chainlink or the network that is Chainlink isn't compatible with other things. And so I think you see like Polkadot, Cosmos, a lot of the interoperability chains, Icon, all of these networks are starting to work with Chainlink to integrate. And I think Cardano is likely going to do the same thing because, first of all, Chainlink is hot, and Chainlink has a fairly reasonable amount of developer resources in play, which I think is important. So I have a feeling Chainlink will be in the game for Cardano from an Oracle perspective, but I think Cardano is still in a position now where they need to, by the end of 2020, if they possibly can, get their development milestone across the finish line into mainnet for their virtual machine, for their Haskell-based scripting language for smart contracts. It's called Plutus. And then their abstracted graphical user interface smart contract platform called Marlowe. Like those three things have to get done by the end of the year. Early 2021 is fine, but as soon as possible so they can start getting people building stuff. And so apparently we're supposed to get a test net for all that stuff in like now, basically like Q3. And so if we can do that, I think they should be throwing resources at getting developers on board to start building applications, building DeFi type applications, building out specs and standards early on, like you have with the ERC standards.
Yeah.
So that when mainnet comes, all they have to do is port the stuff over to mainnet, and you already have a ton of stuff to talk about and to work with and users to use.
Interesting. Boy, it's exciting to watch this literally get built in real time. And I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about this exciting new world of programmable money. Maybe, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, we can talk about this off air, but I want to sign off. Is there any last parting shot you want to give the audience before we say goodbye?
Only thing I'd like to say is obviously stay safe, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this one. It was fun. It was a fun chat. And of course, please hit subscribe, follow, whatever it is that's relevant on this platform. And thanks very much.
Right on. Thanks, folks, for tuning in to another one-on-one with JerryVHall. Until next time, Pura Vida.